It's always a good day. You could always tell when my mom was mad. She was a pretty talkative person and had an easy laugh, and with us as kids, she would just say directly what it was that we needed to do and how we could be better. But when she was angry with my dad, who worked long hours, her voice would get quiet, and the loudest sounds might be the cabinet doors slamming a little harder than necessary, or the pots banging on the stove. I grew up a middle child with an easygoing temperament, and because my older sister is 7 years older and my younger sister is 5 years younger, we three didn't play together, and we didn't have conflict over whose toys were whose. But when my dad would get home on a cupboard slamming evening, he and mom would have whatever fight they were going to have somewhere out of our sight and out of our earshot. For me, this made for a very peaceful and lovely upbringing, but it also meant that I didn't have any experience with conflict. So when things started to get serious when I was dating the man who's now my husband, I had a lot to learn about what to do when we disagreed. It took me a while to learn that couples could disagree, and it didn't mean the end of the relationship. Now, after 33 years of marriage, some intentional work on my part, and a lot of training about conflict management through my preparation for ministry, I still don't love it. But I have learned some healthier ways to deal with conflict. And I've gotten better and braver about facing it in the moment. We here in this congregation bring a wide variety of experiences of conflict with us when we come in the door. Depending on the styles that were modeled for you or that you have adopted, this may hinder or help getting along in a group such as ours. And this is why we have a behavioral covenant. You've heard it referenced a couple of times today. The UUBN behavioral covenant is not intended to squash conflict, because that would be impossible. Conflict is natural. It's an inevitable part of being in a relationship with another person. Our behavioral contract is instead an outline of the practice of right relations. It expresses a way of being that understands that there will be conflict. Not everyone will show up as their best selves in every moment. This covenant includes a lot of what I've learned in my efforts to become better at engaging with conflict. Before we get any farther into it, I want to express this caveat. Our behavioral covenant works when you're managing garden variety conflict. Just what happens between two people who already care about each other. Abusive situations, or situations where there's a large power differential, require a different approach. But with peers in a voluntary association like this congregation, it can help lead to long and positive relationships. Here's how our behavioral covenant reads. We, as members and friends of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Bloomington Normal, covenant to speak directly with honesty, respect, and kindness, to listen deeply with love and empathy, to welcome each person's uniqueness, to practice a culture of consent by respecting physical and personal boundaries, to accept that conflict occurs and address it with integrity and compassion. When our covenant is broken, we will hold ourselves and each other accountable, make amends, and we will begin again in love. It might feel like this sermon was planned in response to the email y'all got yesterday about removing a member. It wasn't. This was already in the works. But it's interesting and more poignant today. Covenant is not a one-person job. One person cannot make a covenant alone because that would just be an order. You must do this. Covenant's a group project. And one person cannot keep a covenant alone. It requires all parties involved to work honestly and intentionally to come back into covenant through the steps, or to ask for help Help in this congregation can come from me. It can come from the Right Relations team. Covenant requires engagement and an understanding that this is a shared process. It requires everyone involved to be brave and to be kind. Brave in sharing our perspectives directly and honestly with the people involved, and kind in our speech and actions. With this behavioral covenant, we're trying to counter the unhealthy ways of engaging in conflict, like cruelty, name-calling, put-downs, silent seething, or taking the conflict to others and hoping that they will help you take the pressure off. Those of us here in the Midwest are not typically comfortable with open conflict. And there's another whole sermon in here for another day about how fear of open conflict is also a characteristic of the culture of white supremacy. It's tied in with the mistaken belief that people, especially people who share dominant culture characteristics, have a right to be comfortable, that it's a violation to make someone feel uncomfortable. That sermon is for another day. But if that piques your interest, there's a great website, whitesupremacyculture.info, to check out. So our covenant asks us to speak directly, to listen deeply, to welcome uniqueness, to practice consent, to accept and address conflict. And so, new members and longtime members, I am glad you are here in this community. I hope that your relationship with this congregation will be long and fulfilling and joyful. If you've signed the book and agreed to support our mission and our covenant, you're a member. But here's a little secret. There's another unspoken level of membership that maybe some in this room have achieved and some have not. It's not official, but it is real. And here's what I mean. I think the real test of membership is not at the beginning when everything is new and rosy and exciting. But the real test, the moment when you become a member for real, is when this congregation, this minister, this faith disappoints you in some way, and you stay. At that point, you know that your commitment to this faith is bigger than a disappointment over which songs we sing or what color the walls are painted or whether we show up the right way in the public square. That's when you know you're a member. New members, I can't and I won't promise you that everything will be perfect because we are human and we are fallible. But I can promise you that we will sit with you in the hard times and we will rejoice with you in the good times. We will ask you to be brave and kind, and we will ask you when there is conflict to make your best effort to begin again in love. Welcome. We love you.